The British royal family is not only built on sparkling crowns or perfectly rehearsed smiles in front of media cameras. Behind the closed oak doors of the historic Windsor Castle, there actually exists a fierce battlefield of power, where a fragile line between privilege and elimination can be erased by a single silly mistake. The London elite are buzzing about an unprecedented event. Crown Prince William has just launched a very cold internal purge. The targeted objective is none other than Freddie Parker Bowles, the biological grandson that Queen Camilla has wholeheartedly supported. Not a single press release was issued. There was not a single slim chance to explain or apologize. Freddie was permanently banished from all royal privileges and events after a suffocating closed-door meeting with exactly 3 attendees. Frighteningly, William's wrath did not explode into table-pounding or shouting. It was quiet, clear, and chilling to the bone, turning this event from a trivial family trouble into a ruthless constitutional reset right in the middle of peacetime. The most shocking detail, Princess Anne, the most powerful woman and the symbol of the traditional royal family, quietly witnessed the whole incident from a window. She did not intervene, only leaving an approving nod, a sharp implicit signal showing that William's reign will not tolerate those who idle and leech off the institution. Before we dive into the 3 fatal mistakes that ended Freddie's future, and the suffocating moment when William cornered Queen Camilla, I want to ask you this. Do you think this merciless act of eliminating his stepmother's grandson is the cruelty of a cold-blooded person, or is it the mandatory ironclad bravery of a future king? Please leave a comment number 1 if you think William acted too heartlessly, and number 2 if you completely support this decision. But to understand why William acted so ruthlessly towards someone considered family, we must go back in time, looking back at a shocking precedent that this crown prince established with someone carrying a royal bloodline 100 times purer. To understand the full truth about the downfall of Freddie Parker Bowles, we must immediately discard a deadly misconception that this was a moment of impulsiveness from William. In the political world, or at multi-billion-dollar American corporations, we call this a ruthless power grab, while in London, it is called the art of protecting the crown. The decision to banish Queen Camilla's grandson is absolutely not an isolated action or a spontaneous punishment in a moment of anger. In reality, this is an extremely well-calculated move, a successive step in a systematic internal purge campaign that Crown Prince William has quietly initiated since he took practical control of the family. To William, the British royal family is not a normal family with peaceful afternoon tea parties. It is a 1,000-year-old empire, and any weak link can bring down the entire system. And to prove the necessary ruthlessness of a supreme leader, William once sharpened his sword on the very bloodline of the royal family. The first and biggest target in this great purge is none other than Prince Andrew, William's biological uncle, who was once the untouchable golden child of the late Queen Elizabeth. For many long months, the United Kingdom had to witness Andrew's desperate, clinging, and brazen efforts to reclaim his lost halo. Despite shocking international scandals and an indelible stain in the eyes of the public, Andrew still had illusions about a way back. He frantically lobbied in the dark, used all old connections, continuously called senior advisors, and tried to sneak into official family events. Andrew believed that, no matter how crazy the world got, the pure Windsor blood flowing in his veins would be a death exemption card. He yearned to reclaim his noble His Royal Highness title, wanted to take back his honorary military titles, and longed for the public to bow to him once again. Leaked insider sources showed that Andrew used every family card to exert pressure, forcing King Charles to soften. But Andrew made a fatal miscalculation. The person holding the real power to protect the institution at this time is no longer a hesitant older brother, but the heir to the throne, Crown Prince William. The moment that decided Andrew's fate took place in a closed room, where William sat directly opposite his father. The atmosphere at that time was completely devoid of familial affection. King Charles, as an older brother, might still have some lingering sorrow or internal struggle. But William entered the room as a royal executioner, placing an ironclad sentence on the table. He looked straight into King Charles' eyes and demanded his father sign the decision to completely cut off all of Andrew's privileges. No concessions were allowed to be made. There was no such thing as temporarily stepping back behind the scenes or waiting for public opinion to settle down for reconsideration. William stated clearly and decisively that this family had given Andrew too many chances, and right at this moment, that number is officially 0 chances. Not a single privilege. Not a single leniency. 0 chances left. Not a single door is left open for future negotiations. Andrew was erased from the royal operating system coldly and permanently. It was William's calm attitude when crossing out his biological uncle that made the London elite shudder. The senior aides present that day realized a terrifying but necessary truth. William carries a steel heart. He is a man who has witnessed the fragility of the crown, has seen his family torn apart by the press, and has personally cleaned up the ruins caused by indiscipline. William's psychology is shaped by a supreme survival principle. The survival of the institution stands above blood relations. Royal blood is not an armor shielding behaviors that damage the image of the throne. If you are a liability, a hazard, a risk, you will be surgically removed from the royal body without anesthesia. The decision to eliminate Andrew is not simply a matter of dealing with an individual, it is a declaration of power. It is a stern warning sent to all other members. Do not use bloodline as a shield, because this future king has no concept of partiality. The downfall of Prince Andrew is the perfect draft, the most brutal precedent clearing the way for subsequent judgments. William has established a new standard, a red line no one is allowed to cross. When you are ready to smash the future of your own biological uncle carrying pure royal blood, cleaning up the cumbersome, patched-up roots from the stepmother's family becomes a very simple math problem. It explains why William could be so terrifyingly calm when facing the arrogance of his maternal side. If a biological prince was ruthlessly stripped of everything, what made Camilla's family believe they could stand above the law? The answer lies in a survival handbook that has been incubated for 2 decades. In elite political culture, people understand a basic rule very well. Those who have to rise from the mud of criticism often carry the most extreme and terrifying thirst for power. Camilla did not simply smile and walk into Windsor Castle through the front door. She had to struggle to survive a media and psychological siege that lasted a full 20 years. 20 long years of waiting, 20 years of swallowing tears to endure public alienation, the sharp glares from the late Queen Elizabeth, and having to live weakly under the seemingly insurmountable giant shadow of Princess Diana. When the Queen Consort crown was finally placed on her head, for Camilla, it was not just the sublimation of a forbidden love. It was compensation. But for Tom Parker Bowles, her son, that compensation seemed never to be enough. Let us try to analyze the psychological lens of a man like Tom. His mother is now the Queen of the United Kingdom, the most influential woman. But what about him? Still just a commoner standing faintly on the fringes of greatness. Tom's underlying resentment is like a toxic fire, smoldering behind fake polite smiles in front of camera flashes. He bitterly looks at the massive wealth, absolute power, and boundless respect that the Windsor family naturally enjoys, then looks back at his own empty hands. My mother had to endure all those years of humiliation to climb to the top, so where is my share? Tom feels this royal family owes him and his mother too great a debt of gratitude, and he is extremely resentful to see his mother's supreme position cannot be converted into any actual privileges or titles for the Parker Bowles family. Not resigning himself to forever standing on the sidelines in the dark, Tom distilled his utmost dissatisfaction into an ambitious life philosophy and stuffed it into his son Freda's head. That philosophy is encapsulated in a chilling directive: take everything by force if necessary. Do not wait to be invited. Demand it. This is absolutely not the calm demeanor of traditional aristocrats. This is the territorial, scrambling mindset of opportunists, a type of violent takeover strategy often seen among seasoned wolves on Wall Street, not in the quiet, majestic corridors of Buckingham Palace. Tom trained his son that humility and etiquette are just a cowardly shell for those at the bottom. If you want a seat at the banquet table of the most powerful forces in the world, you are not allowed to wait for people to set the dishes for you. You must pull the chair yourself, sit down, and demand the largest portion. And what is the most remarkable thing in this play? Queen Camilla, instead of immediately extinguishing this dangerous arrogance to protect her husband's crown, secretly condoned and breathed life into it. She should have been the one to strictly teach Freddie a lesson about his limits. But deep inside the brilliant shell of power, Camilla still carries an extreme insecurity. 20 long years of humiliation are not easily completely erased by a gilded coronation ceremony. She needs an eternal guarantee. She yearns to use her own bloodline to root deeply into the Windsor family, to prove to the world, and perhaps to reassure herself, that her position is now unshakable, that she is not a lucky passing guest, but the true master of this empire. That is why Camilla personally instigated Freddie to blatantly demand a seat of honor at a high-level military event. This is an extremely risky move, because that position is strictly reserved only for full-time working royal members, those who are truly dedicating their lives to the crown. She is using her own thick-skinned survival handbook to pass on to her grandson, harboring the hope that if Freddie constantly appears, constantly demands, then gradually the entire royal system will have to bow down and accept him as a done deal. But Camilla made a fatal miscalculation. She once succeeded because her opponent was a Queen Elizabeth who always avoided conflict, while Freddie now has to face Crown Prince William, a future monarch who does not know the concept of compromise. Armed with his grandmother's secret backing and his father's aggressive philosophy, Freddie entered the playground of power and consecutively committed 3 deadly mistakes, personally digging a grave to bury his own entire future. Mistake number 1. The arrogance of demanding privileges in a bossy manner. Freddie mistakenly thought the title of the Queen's grandson was an infinite universal VIP card. He condescendingly ordered palace staff, demanded bending centuries-old security rules, and had the illusion that he stood on par with those born into the pure royal bloodline. Mistake number 2. The disease of a loose mouth on the media. He arrogantly accepted an interview with a lifestyle magazine, turned himself into the center of public opinion, and blatantly criticized William as a rigid person, implying the future king lacks leadership qualities. This is not only a lack of respect, but a public slander against the hierarchy that William is protecting. And the third mistake, also the mistake that most bare-nakedly depicts Freddie's nature, the attitude of treating the British royal family as a cheap tool to polish his personal name. To him, Windsor Castle, with its 1,000-year history, is not a heritage to be revered, but just a luxurious check-in background to show off to friends. He turns family secrets into currency to buy admiration in the chat groups of rich kids. Freddie is daily eroding the centuries-old prestige of the crown just to exchange for a few superficial privileges for himself. However, the arrogance and boasting in the press of Freddie Parker Bowles still only stopped at the level of an image trouble. In the cruel world of the political elite, an impulsive child can be buried by crisis management experts. But the turning point that turned Freddie from a daily annoyance into an unpardonable constitutional sinner happened on a fateful night when he dared to personally detonate a security bomb and stride across the Crown Prince's bloody red line. Everything began to spiral out of control when the line between stupidity and betrayal was blurred. Freddie, in a drunken stupor, wanting to prove his hidden power to his rich classmates, revealed an earth-shattering secret, top-secret internal medical information about King Charles' actual health condition. Let us understand the severity of this issue from an American perspective. The health of a reigning monarch is not family gossip. It is a top-secret national security matter capable of shaking financial markets and altering global diplomatic chess games. This chilling story quickly spread like a virus. From Freddie's mouth, it reached the ears of a classmate, passed to an influential parent, and finally landed neatly on the desk of a notorious investigative journalist in London. When this information leaked back to the Buckingham Palace press office, the entire system went into a red alert state, similar to how the White House reacts to a cyber attack. What happened next was 48 hours of intensely stressful information suppression. Dozens of senior aides, royal lawyers, and crisis management experts had to stay awake for 2 consecutive nights. They frantically made calls, threatened newsrooms, issued emergency publication bans at 3 in the morning, and used all the hidden power of the crown to extinguish this media bomb right before it could explode on the front pages of the tabloids. By this time, the name Freddie Parker Bowles had been completely redefined on William's desk. He was no longer a bothersome step-nephew. An impulsive teenager with a big mouth and free access to the sensitive medical information of the royal family is a real national security threat. But even a security flaw can be resolved with strict ban rules. The last straw event, the thing that truly nailed the final nail in the coffin named Freddie's future, was much more despicable and ruthless. Exactly 1 leaked audio recording, just a short audio recording secretly filmed with a phone during a private gathering, but it carried the destructive power to ruin everything the maternal family had painstakingly built. In that tape, Freddie did not merely drop a complaint. He blatantly mocked, belittled, and directly attacked the most perfect symbol of the modern royal family, Princess Catherine. Amidst the laughter of his friends, Freddie mimicked Kate's voice, calling her a fake, a well-trained puppet. He sarcastically said that Kate was just playing dress-up as the future queen, that beneath those radiant smiles and glamour was nothing more than an empty shell. The timing when this recording was smuggled out and spread in closed chat groups was an ultimate humiliation, because it happened exactly 2 days before William and Catherine had an extremely important joint appearance schedule where they were expected to showcase the absolute unity of the dynasty. And here is the detail that makes the story chilling. Queen Camilla had heard the rumors about this recording even before it reached William's ears. But what did she do? Nothing at all. She was completely silent. Why would an experienced woman, who had been through countless media storms, not immediately extinguish this rebellious behavior of her grandson? The answer lies in the darkest corner of Camilla's psychology. Despite sitting on the throne, deep inside, she has always been tormented by hidden jealousy. She spent half her life fighting for public approval, only to bitterly watch Catherine step in and easily capture the heart of the entire world with her innate grace. Catherine shines brightly, completely overshadowing her mother-in-law's position. Freddie's toxic insults, unconsciously, spoke the dark thoughts that Camilla had buried in her heart for many years, but never dared to utter. She stayed silent, because some small, twisted part of her felt no regret at all hearing someone drag that perfect daughter-in-law into the mud. But to Crown Prince William, that complicit silence and Freddie's insulting words were an irreversible death sentence. Touching the monarchical system, he can handle it like a head of state. But insulting Catherine, the wife he loves, the mother of his children, and the future queen of the United Kingdom, Freddie stepped straight onto William's absolute red line. William's psychology at this moment was no longer that of a politician protecting the organization, but of a man who had witnessed his mother, Princess Diana, being torn apart to the very end by the media and the parasites around her. He swore to build an impenetrable fortress around Catherine. When Freddy dared to mock that fortress, the matter immediately turned into a deep, personal grudge. Tolerance was exhausted. Compassion was burned to ashes. William saw through the betrayal of the maternal side, realizing that these people not only drained the glory, but were also ready to stab his woman in the back just for fun. When a drop of royal blood has turned into a dose of poison, William does not need to shout. He chose the most ruthless way a man could do, forcing his opponent to death in absolute silence. Among the elite, supreme power is never shown through noisy tantrums or broken arguments. It is executed through a much more cruel art, silent elimination. When a drop of royal blood has turned into a dose of poison, William does not need to shout. The system freezing process for Freddie Parker Bowles began invisibly, but suffocatingly, to the extreme, like the way someone coldly drains the oxygen in a closed room. Not a single dismissal document was sent. Not a single warning call from senior secretaries. Simply waking up one morning, Freddie realized he had become a ghost right in the middle of the world he once proudly belonged to. The first slap came from minor procedural details, but carried immense destructive power. Freddie was shocked to discover his name had been neatly crossed out, leaving no trace from the guest list for a private tea party in the Windsor Gardens. When he tried to reply to an invitation for a smaller family event that had been scheduled and confirmed in advance, the electronic system reported a rejection error. The peak of alienation from the machine was when Freddie realized he had been kicked out of the internal chat group, the only top-secret communication method for members to arrange weekend schedules at the castle. He panicked and called the palace staff, the ones who just a few weeks ago were bowing submissively to open doors for him. Now, on the other end of the line, were only stereotypical answers, skillful rejections, and absolutely not a single explanation. No one dared to tell the truth, because the invisible embargo had been issued from the position of absolute power. The boycott reached the realm of ultimate humiliation at a public charity walk event in Windsor Park. Not resigning himself to being ignored, Freddie followed his father's arrogant advice, deciding to appear unannounced to force William to face and acknowledge his existence. But what happened next was more ruthless than a death sentence. Freddie stood helplessly at the edge of the crowd, trying to catch the eyes of the people he called family. But the response was only a frozen void. The royal staff walked past him as if he were an invisible pocket of air. William saw Freddie, but the crown prince's face immediately hardened into a quiet block of ice, his cold eyes sweeping past as if looking at a complete stranger. And the thing that pierced Freddie's heart the most was Camilla's reaction. The grandmother who once condoned, aided all his demands, now glued her eyes to some undefined point in the distance, resolutely not daring to turn her head to make eye contact with her biological grandson even once. The feeling of shameful humiliation rushed in, crushing Freddie's last bit of cheap self-esteem, forcing him to turn his back and flee the scene even before the event could finish. William had locked on his target, but he is a visionary strategist. He needed a clean, legal, and indisputable reason before the public, if anyone later wondered about the sudden disappearance of the Queen's grandson. And Freddie, in his ultimate stupid vanity, handed William a perfect excuse on a silver platter. During a weekend stay at Windsor, Freddie impulsively posted a series of stories on Instagram from inside a restricted area, not meant for outsiders of the estate. A photo, although blurred, still clearly revealed the internal corridor and the presence of the high-level security team in the background. Even though the post was taken down in less than 1 minute, the palace's cybersecurity system managed to capture everything. To William, this is not a teenager's unintentional mistake. This is a serious security leak, an operational flaw that could endanger the life of the institution. The reason was sufficient, the sentence was approved, and the final slash was officially swung down. The final chapter of this power tragedy did not take place in a magnificent hall with dozens of servants, but in a small, closed living room, usually reserved only for quiet family conversations. The most chilling and highly calculated detail of this confrontation was the number of people present. There were exactly 3 people present in that room: Crown Prince William, Queen Camilla, and Freddie. Absolutely not a single aide, bodyguard, or private secretary was allowed to enter. William wanted it to happen exactly this way. He designed the setting so meticulously that he did not want to leave any living witness who could leak information to the press that the Crown Prince had lost his temper or raised his voice. Everything had to be absolutely controlled, cold-blooded, and deeply personal in its elimination. The atmosphere in the room thickened, suffocating to the point of being hard to breathe. William did not raise his voice even half a note. His calmness at this moment was like a sharp scalpel, slowly cutting off every privilege of the opponent. He looked straight at Freddie, announcing emotionlessly that his access to Windsor Castle had ended. His position at family events had ended. All involvement in royal life terminated immediately. He used the word permanently. And then, William leaned forward, narrowing the distance, and launched the finishing blow. His eyes bored deep into the person opposite, stressing every word, sharp as broken glass. "You have no right to mock my wife and still call yourself family." The naked truth was mercilessly exposed. Freddie, with a broken and trembling voice, looked over at his grandmother, desperately begging for salvation, asking Camilla directly if this was her decision. But William did not allow any compromise or negotiation to take place in this room. He immediately cut in, blocking all ways of retreat, his steely gaze pinning down his powerful stepmother. "This decision is for the family, not for an individual." That was the moment the most humiliating, bitter silence enveloped Camilla. She did not utter half a word to defend Freddie, and also did not dare to protect herself. In that cruel split second, all illusions of absolute power she had painstakingly built over the past 20 years shattered into pieces. She realized a brutal truth of the invisible Constitution. She might be the queen of the present, but the cold-blooded man sitting opposite her is the king of the future. In the battle to protect the crown and his woman, Camilla completely has no chance of winning. Speaking up to protect the sinner at this moment means political suicide. She chose to swallow the humiliation backwards, biting her teeth to accept sacrificing her biological grandson to keep the little fragile position left of hers in the upcoming reign. While Freddie Parker Bowles trudged along carrying his luggage, stepping back from the gilded doors and getting into an anonymous taxi exactly like an imposter who had just been unmasked, from a high window there were eyes that quietly observed it all. It was not a look of gloating or pity, but the eyes of someone who had spent her whole life protecting the weight of this crown, Princess Anne. The contrasting image that took place in that moment at Windsor Castle carried a symbolism so deep it was chilling. Down in the courtyard was Freddie, a young man wallowing in a toxic culture of privilege, someone who always believed that the blood of his grandmother being the queen naturally gave him the right to enjoy luxury and power without having to trade anything. And standing silently behind the glass window was the embodiment of a completely opposite spirit. Princess Anne represents the most quintessential, the harshest, and the most respectable of the old guard generation. Throughout more than half a century, the elite and the public have witnessed her dedicate 50 continuous years to this institution without ever letting out a word of complaint. 50 years with tens of thousands of large and small events, 50 years of putting aside personal needs, sacrificing private freedom, and quietly standing behind as a solid launching pad for the throne. From the era of the late Queen Elizabeth to the current reign of King Charles, Anne has lived a life proving the truth that the crown is not a piece of jewelry for showing off, but it is a shackle of responsibility. She quietly watched the taxi carrying Camilla's arrogant grandson disappear behind the iron gates, her eyes unyielding. To a woman who has used both blood and sweat to preserve the dignity of the family, the elimination of a parasite by the system is not a tragedy. It is an inevitable purification. A few days after that shocking expulsion event, where absolutely no official document was published, at a high-level diplomatic reception, an extremely subtle moment, but carrying the weight of 1,000 pounds, took place. In a small group of veteran members, Queen Camilla's name was called out, accompanied by whispers implicitly referring to the sudden disappearance of Freddie Parker Bowles. The others appeared confused or evasive, but Princess Anne just stood there, her aura majestic, and she left an extremely gentle nod. To those who do not understand royal politics, that might just be a normal communication reflex. But to the longtime staff and senior aides present that day, that nod gave them goosebumps. That was absolutely not the cheap gloating of trivial family conflicts. It was a verdict. The nod of Princess Anne represented the supreme approval of the entire old system, of the hidden forces that have steered the monarchy through centuries. With that silent gesture, she was sending a clear message to the entire kingdom. What Crown Prince William had just done was not tyranny, but a sacred act to protect the survival of the institution. Anne, who rarely agreed with personal behaviors, now publicly, in an extremely discreet way, stood by the nephew who was cleaning up the order and discipline she had always preserved. That support did not just stop at a nod in the middle of a crowd. That evening, an extremely rare phone call was made from the secure line of Princess Anne directly to the office of Crown Prince William. Anne is famous for being a woman of principle, cold, and never wasting time on sappy emotional conversations. But in this short call, her tone carried an unusually profound and solemn dignity. Without any beating around the bush, she went straight to the point with a sentence that summarized the entire bravery of a king. You did what needed to be done without flinching. That praise from the mouth of Princess Anne is the most prestigious medal William could receive, far exceeding any cheering from the press or the public. It is the confirmation that William has officially passed the harshest test of power. He has proven himself to possess the steel heart necessary to rule. That call was a moment of spiritual transition, when the old generation protecting the crown saw the silhouette of an outstanding monarch in the next generation, someone ready to chop off rotten roots, even if they grew from the family of the reigning queen. The core lesson drawn from this event shatters all illusions of those craving the royal halo. The story of Freddie Parker Bowles is a bloody proof of an unchanging truth. Accessing the British royal family is never a natural privilege, even when your grandmother is the woman wearing the most powerful queen crown. Bloodline or marital relationships are not a free ticket for you to step into Windsor Castle and freely drain its greatness for personal gain. Here, every privilege has its price. You cannot demand a seat at the banquet table if you are not ready to wash the dishes. That is the supreme benefit that can only be exchanged for absolute loyalty, for silent sacrifice, and for a deep sense of duty to the public, the things that Princess Anne has diligently carried out over the past half a century, and the things that Freddie blatantly insulted. If you consider the crown a business tool, the crown will crush you. The departure of Freddie Parker Bowles not only closes a family drama, but it officially opens a new era at Windsor. The 1,000-year-old crown of the United Kingdom has never been just a sparkling piece of jewelry to show off. It always carries a weight that can crush those who do not have enough bravery to shoulder it. By kicking Freddie Parker Bowles out of the system, Crown Prince William sent a chilling but undeniable message. He is ready to cut off any arm that dares to stain this sacred legacy, whether it is his own flesh and blood or the family of the reigning queen. The shocking event of Freddie has now gone far beyond the boundaries of a normal stain from the maternal side. It officially becomes an iron precedent, an unwritten constitution shaping the entire upcoming reign. That principle is very clear. At Windsor, all privileges must be exchanged for absolute loyalty and sacrifice. This place is never a fame launchpad or a cheap stage for anyone to blatantly seek personal profit. The decisive action of William is a bloody but extremely necessary purge to protect the dignity of the institution. Furthermore, he is asserting the position of a man ready to do everything to protect his family. William declares to the whole world that he will not let anyone dare to threaten or mock his woman, and absolutely does not allow the monarchy to be turned into an entertaining joke in the newspapers. The moment Queen Camilla had to swallow her humiliation in resigned silence, placed next to the majestic approving nod of Princess Anne, are the two most perfect historical pieces. They not only close a calculating power play, but are also the starkest proof showing that the ultimate transfer of power is truly complete, and the era of iron-fisted rule by William has actually begun. While rumors over the past many months only caused public skepticism, the latest development is believed to have plunged the British royal family into one of its most severe crises in many years. According to circulating information, Buckingham Palace has allegedly stripped Queen Camilla of all her titles after a shocking assassination plot was uncovered. In just a few hours, the atmosphere inside the palace, which is always tightly controlled, turned into the focal point of a series of speculations, controversies, and unanswered questions. What actually happened behind the closed doors of the palace remains a mystery. People are wondering why a figure who once held one of the most important positions in the royal family is suddenly facing the prospect of losing everything. It remains to be seen whether this is an unprecedented decision or just the tip of a much larger crisis that the public is not yet aware of. In our video today, we will follow each development, analyze the information causing a public stir, and separate the published reports from the rumors spreading on social media. Please remember that many details in this story have not been officially confirmed, and they are currently the subject of widespread debate. If you are interested in the latest developments of the British royal family and want to explore the full picture behind this shocking incident, do not forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you do not miss the next analysis. Now, let us begin. The November rain lashed cold whips of water against the 2-inch thick bulletproof glass of the royal study at Buckingham Palace. Inside, the room was wrapped in the absolute silence of the soundproofing system and the warm scent of ancient oak. King Charles III stood in the middle of the room, breathing steadily, his face rosy, proof of his miraculous recovery after a long year of battling cancer. He walked toward the east bookshelf, where historical documents from the Victorian era were kept. Charles needed to find an old travel diary to reference for his speech to the Commonwealth next week. The oak ladder sliding on brass rails was pulled out. Charles stepped up to the third rung. A small accident happened. The sole of his leather shoe slipped on the freshly polished wood. The king's center of gravity shifted. Reacting naturally to keep his balance, he lunged to the right, his shoulder and arm slamming hard into the polished black ironwood wall paneling behind him. Specifically, he hit a carved relief of a lion's head holding a ring in its mouth, a decorative detail from the time of King George VI that no one had ever paid much attention to. A dry, metallic clanking sound rang out, followed by the groan of mechanical gears that hadn't been used in a long time. Charles froze, his hands still gripping the ladder. Before his eyes, the heavy wooden panel, which usually looked like a seamless part of the room's architecture, suddenly shuddered. It didn't swing open like a normal door, it slid sideways. The ironwood panel moved slowly to the left, revealing a rectangular niche cut deep into the palace's ancient stone. The darkness inside the niche breathed out a smell of mold and cold dampness, the scent of secrets buried for generations. Charles's heart pounded in his chest. He stepped down from the ladder and approached the dark hollow. This was not a royal safe. This was a secret mechanism that even he, the master of this palace for decades, had never known about. Perhaps it was designed for wartime emergencies, or to hide things not meant for official history books. Inside that dark space, there was no gold or crown. There was only a single object, a lead-gray metal box, a modern type that is fireproof and waterproof. It looked completely out of place against the 19th-century limestone surrounding it. The layer of dust on the lid was very thin, suggesting it had been placed there not long ago. Charles's hand trembled as he touched the cold metal surface. He lifted the box out. It was heavy. There was no combination lock, just a simple latch. He flipped the latch. The lid popped open. Inside was a thin file folder, neatly clipped together, and a cream-colored envelope, the kind of high-quality paper often used by the aristocracy. Charles picked up the envelope first. No postage stamp, only a line of handwritten text in purple ink, the specific ink Camilla always used for personal invitations. To Andrew, Plan B. Charles felt his throat go dry. He tore open the envelope. The paper inside was dated the 14th of February 2024. That was the time he had just received his cancer diagnosis and started his first round of chemotherapy. Those were the darkest days when he lay bedridden, his body exhausted, and Camilla was the only one by his side, feeding him every spoonful of porridge, handing him every pill. He read the content of the letter. Andrew. He is starting to weaken. The medicine is working exactly as you planned. Don't worry about the will. I have controlled the lawyers and blocked all access from William. Be patient. The throne will soon need a regent. When that happens, the promise made years ago will be fulfilled. The paper slipped from Charles's hand, fluttering in the air before landing on the carpet. The blood in his body felt like it had frozen solid. The feeling wasn't pain, but a shock so deep it was numbing. He hurriedly flipped open the file folder underneath. The bold titles struck his eyes. Power Transfer Agreement and Medical Crisis Management. Top Secret. Below were two signatures painfully familiar, Camilla Shand and Andrew Parker Bowles. Charles flipped through the pages fast, his eyes scanning the black lines of text that danced like daggers. This was not a normal legal document. This was a murder script legalized in administrative language. Clause 4. Medical Intervention. Ensure the treatment regimen causes maximum exhaustion. Replace recovery supplements with an immune-suppressing compound, Compound X, to prevent the subject's body from healing itself. Clause 7. Regency Plan. When Subject C falls into a state of permanent unconsciousness or passes away, the regency power will be immediately activated for the Queen. All executive powers will be transferred without going through Parliament for the first 48 hours. Financial Appendix. Transfer 30% of profits from the Duchy of Lancaster's private investment funds and rights to exploit royal real estate to Andrew Parker Bowles's shell company immediately after Operation London Bridge. The code name for the King's death takes place. Charles slammed the file shut and threw it back into the box. He leaned his hands on the desk, gasping for breath. Memories of last year came rushing back like a flood. The constant fatigue, the fevers with no clear cause, the times he felt his chest crushed, his mind foggy and disoriented. The doctors back then explained it as side effects of chemotherapy. But now the truth was exposed. Those were not side effects. That was the direct effect of poisoning. The woman he called his wife, the one he had fought the world to make queen, had been silently killing him day by day, hour by hour. And the puppeteer behind it, the ultimate beneficiary, was her ex-husband. Charles stood up straight. His eyes changed. The hurt of a husband vanished, replaced by the ruthless coldness of a king facing treason. He didn't smash things. He didn't scream. In the vast room, Charles walked beneath the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. He took a deep breath, regaining absolute calm. He returned to his desk and flipped open the lid of the secure red phone, the hotline that connects directly only to the Prince of Wales and the Prime Minister in case of nuclear war. He dialed William's number. At Adelaide Cottage, Windsor, the clock showed 1 a.m. William's personal phone vibrated with a uniquely piercing frequency, the code-red signal. William sat up immediately, throwing the blanket aside so as not to wake Catherine. He grabbed the phone, authenticating it with a retina scan. "Father?" William asked briefly, his voice completely awake, his hand already reaching for the Glock 17 pistol kept in a fingerprint-locked drawer. "Come to Buckingham immediately," Charles's voice rang out, not in panic, but with the commanding tone of a commander-in-chief. "Come alone. Use entrance number 4, the East Underground Tunnel. Do not let anyone see you, not even the outer security team. Turn off all tracking devices." "Understood. I will be there in 20 minutes," William replied and hung up. He quickly put on a black tactical outfit and threw on a long coat to conceal his weapon. He moved to the basement of Adelaide Cottage, where a secret passage led to the Victorian sewer system which connected to the Royal Tunnel network. William started his specialized electric motorcycle and sped off into the darkness beneath London. Exactly 30 minutes later, the camouflaged door behind the bookcase in King Charles's study shuddered slightly and opened. William stepped in, brushing tunnel dust off his coat. He saw his father sitting motionless in an armchair, facing the gray metal box in a roaring fireplace. Charles said nothing, only nodding toward the box. William approached, took off his gloves, and began to flip through the documents. The room was silent, save for the rustling of paper and the crackle of dry wood in the fire. William read very fast, his blue eyes, usually warm, now narrowed, sharp as a scalpel. His jaw clenched tight when he read the section about dividing assets for Andrew Parker Bowles. Last year, William spoke up, his voice low and hoarse from suppressing his rage. "When you were in the intensive care unit, gasping for oxygen, they were sitting in the next room drafting this." "Correct," Charles replied, his eyes still staring into the flames. "I asked myself why my body reacted so violently to the medicine. I thought it was just old age and weakness. It turns out it was the result of the devotion of the person sharing my pillow." William slammed the file shut. "This is attempted murder, Father. It's not just an affair or greed for power anymore. This is a crime. Andrew Parker Bowles and that woman planned to kill the king to seize the regency. I recovered. That was the only variable they didn't foresee." Charles turned to look at his son, his eyes burning with the fire of vengeance. "The fact that I hit that wall and found this is also God's will. God did not allow this dynasty to fall into the hands of traitors." William stood up, pacing the room, calculating strategic options. "We need to act tonight. I will mobilize the SAS, Special Air Service, to raid Clarence House, arrest her immediately." "No." Charles raised a hand to stop him. His voice was steely. "If we make a noise now, Andrew will destroy the evidence on his end. He is a former army officer, an old intelligence fox. If he knows he's exposed, he will activate contingency measures to scatter assets and wipe digital traces. We need a comprehensive ambush." Charles stepped closer to his son and placed a hand on William's shoulder. "Take this entire file. Bring it to your base. Mobilize the Grey Cloaks team, those who are absolutely loyal. I want forensic analysis immediately to verify fingerprints, DNA samples, and the age of the ink. I need ironclad evidence that cannot be denied in court." "And Camilla?" William asked, looking worriedly toward the corridor leading to the Queen's bedroom. "Leave her to me," Charles said, a cold smile passing over his lips. "Tomorrow morning, I have scheduled afternoon tea with her in the High Garden. I want to see her face when the mask falls off. You prepare the arrest warrant. When my teacup touches the saucer, that is the signal to attack." William nodded, understanding his father's intent. This wasn't just arresting criminals. This was an internal purge, requiring absolute precision. He gathered the documents into the box and secured the latch. "I'm going. Tomorrow morning, everything ends," William said, then vanished into the darkness of the tunnel, carrying the evidence that could bring down a fake dynasty. At the high-security underground bunker, Bunker 4, beneath Kensington Palace, the clock showed 3 a.m. William tossed the file onto the cold metal table. His team of most trusted agents, the Grey Cloaks Group, including forensic experts, white hat hackers, and former MI6 intelligence officers, had fully assembled. No one asked why they were summoned in the middle of the night. Their loyalty was absolute. "I need a comprehensive analysis right now," William ordered briefly. The experts began working at breakneck speed. Laser spectral scanners swept over the handwritten letter. The screen displayed ink analysis data detailed down to the micron. Ink analysis result: Mont Blanc Fountain Pen Ink Royal Blue Limited Edition. The oxidation level of the ink strokes corresponds to a period of 12 to 14 months ago. Completely matches the time the king began treatment. Fingerprint result: Subject 1, Charles III, fresh. Subject 2, Camilla R., old. Subject 3, Andrew Parker Bowles, old, located at the edge of the paper. William nodded. The physical evidence was clear, but he needed more. He needed proof of the murderous act. Connect to the database of the London Clinic Hospital. Retrieve the king's entire medical record for 2024. Search for keywords Compound X or any strange substance in the inventory list. William directed the IT team leader. The sound of typing rang out like machine gun fire. 15 tense minutes passed. "Your Highness, we have data," a hacker shouted. The pharmaceutical warehouse system records the release of a batch of drugs coded CX99 in March of last year. The trade name was disguised as high-dose multivitamins, but the actual chemical composition. William stepped to the screen, inviting Dr. Evans, the new head physician of the royal household, to take a look. Dr. Evans looked at the chemical formula, his face turning pale. "This is an extremely potent immune suppressor, usually only used for organ transplant patients to prevent rejection. If this is injected into a person undergoing chemotherapy, good Lord, it will completely wipe out white blood cells. The king wouldn't die of cancer. He would die from a common cold because his immune system was destroyed." "Who signed the release?" William asked, his voice icy. "Night shift head nurse Sarah Jenkins. She resigned in June 2024 and is currently living in France. Track Sarah Jenkins' bank account?" William ordered next. The flow of money was drawn on the big screen like a crime map. £2 million had been transferred to Sarah Jenkins' account from a ghost company based on the Isle of Man. The real owner of this company was hidden through many layers of shell companies. But with MI6's tracking technology, the final layer was peeled back. The name of the ultimate beneficiary appeared: Tom Parker Bowles, Camilla and Andrew's son. William slammed his fist on the metal table. The sound echoed through the bunker. They used their own son as a middleman to launder money. That whole family is a criminal organization. Every piece of the puzzle was complete. Camilla gave the orders. Andrew made the plan. Their son laundered the money, and their henchmen carried out the poisoning. It was a perfect closed loop, broken only by King Charles's accidental slip. Arrest Sarah Jenkins immediately. Extradite her back to England tonight, via military jet. William ordered the tactical team leader. And arrest the pharmacist who signed the drug release at the London clinic. I want their testimony before dawn. That night, while London slept, the pitch-black cars of the Special Forces sped out in all directions. The hunt had begun. 4:30 a.m. In a luxury apartment in West London, the head pharmacist of the London clinic was fast asleep. The front door of the apartment was blown open by a small directed explosive device. The SAS team stormed in. The pharmacist was dragged out of bed, pinned to the floor, and handcuffed behind his back before he could understand what was happening. In a villa in the south of France, Sarah Jenkins suffered the same fate. A special joint force captured her just as she was packing her bags to flee, having sensed something was wrong. 6 a.m. In the soundproof interrogation room of MI5, the pharmacist sat shivering, facing William through a one-way mirror. He initially tried to deny it, claiming it was just a medical error. But when William threw the file with Camilla and Andrew's signatures onto the table, along with the bank statement showing the bribe money he received, the man collapsed completely. I had no choice," he stammered, tears and snot running down his face. "Mr. Andrew Parker Bowles came to me. He said this was a secret order from the Queen to help the king pass away peacefully and reduce his pain. I thought I was doing humanitarian work." "Humanitarian work with poison?" the investigator shouted. "Speak! Who directly administered the drug to the king?" "It was Camilla," he mumbled. "She personally requested I give the vial of CX99 to her every Friday evening. She said she wanted to inject her husband herself to show her affection. She did it with her own hands. This testimony was the final nail in the coffin. Camilla was not just an indirect mastermind, she was the direct executioner. She used the title of a devoted wife to inject poison into her husband's veins. William stood behind the glass, his fists clenched so tight his fingernails dug into his flesh. He turned to Lieutenant Colonel Thompson. "Prepare the forces. Main targets: Clarence House and White's Club. G hour is 10 a.m. 10 a.m. The High Garden, Buckingham Palace." The morning air was crisp after the night's rain. Charles sat on a white rattan chair, a set of gold-plated bone china tea service in front of him. He wore a light gray suit, appearing relaxed and at ease. But beneath that exterior, his heart beat with the rhythm of a warrior before battle. Camilla appeared from the corridor, radiant in an emerald-green silk dress. She smiled, the smile that had fooled the world for so many years. She was completely unaware that her network of henchmen had been rounded up, and the most important witnesses were sitting in interrogation rooms. "Hello, my dear," Camilla said, her voice sweet, leaning down to kiss Charles on the cheek. Charles leaned slightly to avoid it, pretending to reach for the newspaper. Camilla's kiss landed on empty air. She paused for a split second, but quickly regained her composure, sitting down opposite him. "The weather is so beautiful today," Camilla said, lifting the teapot. "I told the kitchen to brew a special Earl Grey for you. It helps relax the nerves very well." She poured the reddish-brown stream of tea into Charles's cup. The scent of bergamot wafted up sweetly. Charles watched the rippling tea. He remembered the nights lying in his hospital bed when Camilla lovingly injected medicine into him. He had once been grateful for it. Now that memory made him nauseous. "Relax the nerves," Charles repeated, his voice calm but cold as ice. He looked up, staring straight at Camilla, or suppress the immune system. Camilla's arm holding the teapot went rigid in midair. The smile on her lips vanished. Her eyes widened in shock. What did you say?" Charles folded the newspaper and set it aside. From his suit pocket, he pulled a miniature copy of the handwritten letter found in the wall. He slid it across the glass table, stopping right in front of Camilla. "I found the box in the wall, Camilla," Charles said, every word clear and distinct. "My slip yesterday turned out to be God's arrangement. I have read it all, from the contract to the Plan B to the agreement splitting assets with Andrew." Camilla's face turned from pale white to a sickly gray. She dropped the teapot. The pot shattered on the tiles, hot tea splashing onto her expensive dress. "Charles, listen to me explain. It's just a misunderstanding," Camilla stammered, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the table, breathing heavily. "Andrew! He forced me. He threatened me. Don't shift the blame." Charles cut her off, his voice hardening. "The signature is yours. The handwriting is yours. And your own hands injected poison into me every Friday night. Don't tell me Andrew forced you to hold the needle." Camilla looked around, trying to find an escape route or call her personal bodyguards, but she realized the garden was unusually deserted. No servants, no familiar guards. Charles picked up his teacup. He looked at it for a moment, then slowly set it down hard on the saucer. That was the signal. From the artistically trimmed bushes around them, from behind the stone statues, dozens of SAS Special Forces soldiers equipped with heavy weapons and clad in full black armor emerged simultaneously. They moved fast and efficiently, forming a tight circle. William stepped out from behind Charles, his face cold. He didn't look at Camilla, but nodded to the captain of the guard. Camilla screamed, backing away and knocking over her chair. "William, what are you doing? I am the Queen. Do you dare touch me?" Two female special officers stepped forward without a word. The cold click of handcuffs rang out. "You are no longer Queen," William said, his voice echoing through the garden. "The order to strip your titles has been signed and sealed with the royal seal. You are under arrest for the attempted murder of the king, treason and embezzlement of national assets. Charles, save me. We are husband and wife. I did it all for love." Camilla screamed, struggling in desperation as she was dragged away across the gravel. Charles stood up, turning his back on the screaming woman. He looked at the roses in full bloom, but in his eyes they looked gray. "Love," Charles whispered to himself. "You never knew what love was. You only loved the crown on my head." At the same time, Camilla was arrested at the palace. Another strike was taking place in central London. White's Gentlemen's Club on St. James's Street, the gathering place for the most powerful elite in Britain. Andrew Parker Bowles was sitting in a VIP room enjoying a glass of 50-year-old single malt whiskey. He was laughing with a few old friends about his plans to expand his estate. He believed Plan B was progressing well. Even though Charles seemed to be recovering, he had other backup plans. The thick oak door was kicked open with tremendous force. A stun grenade was thrown into the room. A blinding light flashed, followed by a deafening bang. Andrew was stunned, falling off the sofa, his glass shattering on the floor. When he regained his senses, the barrel of an MP5 submachine gun from the counter-terrorism squad was pressed against his temple. "Andrew Parker Bowles, you are under arrest under the Treason Act of 1351, the commander shouted through his gas mask. "You people are crazy. I am a former officer. I have immunity," Andrew roared, trying to struggle with the instincts of an old soldier. The commander didn't argue. He pulled out a photocopy of the assassination contract and slapped it onto Andrew's face. "Your immunity expired the moment you signed your name on this paper with your ex-wife." Seeing his signature on the contract found in the wall, Andrew went pale. He understood immediately the secret niche had been exposed. Camilla had failed. He was no longer the powerful ex-husband. He was now just a criminal who plotted to kill a king. He gave up, letting the police handcuff him and put a black bag over his head. He was dragged out of the most prestigious club in England like a stray dog. Outside, William had arranged for trusted reporters to be ready. Photos of Andrew, handcuffed, head covered, being escorted into an armored van, quickly spread around the world. This public humiliation was the most painful punishment for an arrogant man like him. At another location, Tom Parker Bowles was also arrested right in his office while trying to destroy financial documents. The entire Parker Bowles clan collapsed in a single morning, 8 p.m. That same day, the Bow Room at Buckingham Palace was solemnly decorated. BBC cameras were ready to broadcast live to billions of viewers globally. King Charles III walked in wearing the uniform of the Admiral of the Fleet, his chest full of medals. Beside him were Prince William and Princess Catherine, along with Princess Anne and Prince Edward. The full presence of the core members showed absolute unity. The signal light turned red. Charles looked straight into the lens, his gaze steady. "People of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth," Charles began, his deep voice resonating. "Today, with deep sorrow, but also with the resolve necessary to protect the dignity of the throne, I announce an unprecedented decision. The Privy Council has passed a decree stripping Mrs. Camilla Shand of all royal titles, honorary military ranks, and patronages. From this moment on, she is no longer queen, nor a member of the royal family." Although the speech did not go into the gruesome details of the murder plot to avoid causing social panic, Charles skillfully used the heaviest legal phrases: serious violation of the oath of allegiance, threat to national security, and betrayal of the monarch's trust. Immediately after the speech, the palace allowed a controlled leak of parts of the contract in the wall to the press. The world was shocked. The image of Camilla transformed from a devoted wife into a wicked witch in the eyes of the public. 2 days later, Charles stood in his study watching royal masons working. They were using special mortar and bricks to permanently seal the secret niche behind the lion relief. "Do you want to keep anything from inside it?" William asked, standing beside him. "No," Charles shook his head. "The box and the contract have been moved to the secret archives of the Tower of London. They will stay there forever as a warning." He turned to look at the wall being gradually sealed up. "This wall saved my life, William, but it also taught me the most expensive lesson of my life. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is not the one holding a gun on the battlefield, but the one pouring your tea every morning." "It's all clean now," William said, looking around the room. "We can start over." "Yes," Charles smiled. a smile of genuine relief, a new beginning. No more lies, no more schemes. Outside the window, the royal standard flag still flew proudly in the cold London wind, signaling that the king was still here and this dynasty had weathered the greatest storm to become stronger than ever. Thank you for staying with us until the end of this video. What you have just heard is not a conclusion, but the opening of a much larger question that continues to unfold behind the closed doors of Buckingham Palace. When power, secrecy, and personal ambition collide at the highest level of the monarchy, the truth is rarely simple and never fully revealed at once. As more details emerge and silence grows louder than any official statement, one thing is clear. This story is far from over. What happens next could redefine relationships, reshape authority, and change how the public views the royal institution itself. Now we want to hear from you. Do you believe this decision was inevitable, or is there still more being hidden from the public eye? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you value in-depth analysis and investigative royal coverage, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you do not miss our next update. Thank you for watching. So, in the end, yet another surprising discovery has once again thrust the British royal family into the spotlight. According to circulating information, King Charles was reportedly left utterly shocked after secret letters were uncovered in a lesser-known room, referred to as the Secret Ray Mill Chamber. Public attention is focused not only on the existence of these letters, but also on their alleged content, which is said to potentially shake the public image and reputation of Queen Camilla. People are questioning whether this is merely an exaggerated misunderstanding or truly the missing piece that could alter how everyone views the relationship between the king and the queen. For many years, Camilla has remained one of the most controversial members of the British royal family. Even though she has steadily rebuilt her image since becoming queen, she continually faces criticism, rumors, and endless speculations. Therefore, if the information surrounding these letters turns out to be true, it could absolutely spark a new wave of debate, and even raise numerous questions about trust, transparency, and the secrets that remain hidden behind closed palace doors. In the video today, we will examine the entire progression of this story, analyze the most discussed details, and separate what is confirmed fact from what is simply online speculation. Please watch until the very end so you do not miss any crucial details. And if you enjoy objective and engaging stories about the British royal family, do not forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to join us in our upcoming videos. It all began with an unusual cold draft brushing lightly across King Charles III's cheek. At that depth, inside a wine cellar designed to be completely sealed to preserve rare bottles for decades, such a thing was almost impossible. There were no windows, no openings, only thick stone walls and aged wooden racks filled with the prestigious names of history. But the sensation was real. Cold, sharp, and carrying something that felt like a warning. The king stopped. His eyes moved slowly across each rack, each label arranged neatly like soldiers guarding the past. Then he noticed the anomaly. A bottle of Mouton Rothschild from the year 1982 was slightly out of its perfect position. A small detail, almost impossible for anyone else to notice. But for a man who had lived his entire life within the strict rules of royalty, that misalignment was a sign of interference. Charles reached out. His fingers touched the cold neck of the bottle and gently turned it. In that very moment, a dry clicking sound echoed from behind the wall. The wine rack trembled slightly, revealing a rusted latch hidden deep inside, as if it had been asleep for decades, waiting for the right person to awaken it. The surrounding space seemed to hold its breath. The king hesitated for a brief moment. Then he pressed down. A heavy sound followed. The stone wall in front of him slowly split apart, revealing a deep, endless darkness. A hidden passage. something that did not exist in any official architectural plan of the residence. And in that moment, Charles understood that he had not only opened a physical door, he had opened a piece of history that had been deliberately buried. The air from within was colder, carrying the smell of dampness and time. He stepped forward, each movement slow but resolute. The light from the wine cellar behind him stretched his shadow across the uneven stone floor, creating a scene both lonely and unsettling. At the end of the passage, an old wooden chest lay still. Its surface was covered in dust, but not the dust of centuries. It looked like dust that had been deliberately left there, like a layer of disguise. The carvings on its lid remained clear, suggesting that it had once been a valuable object, perhaps even belonging to a significant period of royal history. The king moved closer. His heart beat slowly but heavily. Something in this space stirred not only curiosity, but a deeper instinct, a feeling that everything was about to change. But at that very moment, a sound came from behind. Footsteps. Charles turned. At the entrance, a figure appeared. Mrs. Mills, the housekeeper. A woman who had served in this residence for many years, known for her discretion and absolute loyalty to Camilla. Her appearance at this exact moment could not be a coincidence. Her eyes flickered for a brief second when she saw the secret door standing open. But in an instant, she regained her composure. Too quickly. Too perfectly. "Your Majesty," she spoke, her voice soft but carrying a hidden tension. "I do not think this place should be opened." Charles did not answer immediately. He simply looked at her, his gaze deep and sharp, as if trying to see through every layer of concealment. Then he turned back to the chest. "You knew about this, did you not?" It was not a question. It was a conclusion. The silence stretched. And that silence said everything. The pieces began to connect in the king's mind. The perfectly timed appearance of Mills, the existence of the hidden passage, and the chest that had been buried for more than 900 days without any royal security force detecting it. A terrifying number. Not because of the time, but because of what it meant. More than 900 days. That meant for nearly 3 years, right beneath his feet, a secret had existed. Protected. Concealed. Controlled. That could only happen if there was a network. A system operated from within. Not by an external enemy, but by those living inside this very residence. Camilla. Her name surfaced in his mind like an unavoidable answer. She was not only his wife. She had built a network of control. A sophisticated internal system that had quietly spread into every corner of royal life. And Mrs. Mills, with her absolute loyalty, was merely one link in that chain. The housekeeper's mistake was not standing here. It was arriving too early. Too hastily, trying to stop something she should have left untouched. Charles placed his hand on the lid of the chest. He could feel the coldness of the wood, as if it had absorbed every secret within over time. "You should leave," he said, his voice low and firm. But Mrs. Mills did not move. 1 second. 2 seconds. The air grew suffocating. At last, she stepped back. Not out of obedience, but because she understood that this moment had moved beyond her control. Charles opened the chest. Inside, bundles of letters were arranged neatly. The paper had yellowed with time, yet the handwriting remained clear. Familiar strokes. Impossible to mistake. The late Queen Elizabeth II. A chill ran down his spine. Not from the temperature, but from realization. These letters were not just memories. They were evidence. Words from the past, preserved and waiting for the day they would be revealed. And if they had been hidden for more than 900 days, then there could only be one reason. Someone did not want him to read them. Someone did not want the truth to be known. Charles picked up a letter. His fingers tightened along the edge of the paper. Behind him, Mrs. Mills stood motionless. But her eyes no longer held the calm she had shown before. Her mistake had already happened. Not because she was loyal, but because she had misjudged the timing. Because, ladies and gentlemen, the tremor carried by those old letters was only the beginning. As Charles slowly unfolded the first letter, another figure appeared at the cellar entrance. Camilla. Half of her face was swallowed by shadow. Her gaze could not be read. And in that very moment, a ruthless battle of minds officially began. Listen to what the late Queen Elizabeth II wrote in the darkness of her final days. Her handwriting remained steady, yet every line of ink carried a weight that was difficult to describe. Charles, I have discovered matters that I cannot expose for fear of fracturing the throne. But if you are reading these lines, it means the truth has been hidden in the place least likely to be suspected. As those words appeared before his eyes, the space within the cellar seemed to close in. No longer just lifeless stone walls. No longer the damp scent of time. It became the presence of a final testament. A warning. A secret entrusted from the past, crossing the boundary of silence to reach the right person at the right moment. Charles stood still. The letter trembled slightly in his hand. Not from fear, but because he understood the person who had written these words. A woman who had devoted her entire life to protecting the stability of the monarchy. Someone who would never speak without evidence. And once she chose to write, the truth behind it could never be mere suspicion. He turned to the next pages. Each letter was arranged with precision, as if prepared for this exact moment. Not scattered confessions, but a systematic record. Observations. Doubts. Small details documented over many months, even many years. And then, a name began to appear with increasing frequency. Camilla. At first, they were only vague notes. Minor changes in the handling of files. Unofficial meetings. Documents delayed in unusual ways. But the more he read, the clearer the picture became. Not coincidence. Not administrative error. But a deliberate chain of actions. The truth was more terrifying than any scandal that had ever shaken the monarchy. Camilla had not merely stood beside the king as a partner. She had quietly infiltrated the most sensitive information systems of the crown. Files meant for only a select few. Decisions of historic consequence. Documents capable of reshaping how the public viewed an entire reign. According to what was recorded in the letters, more than 40 top-secret files had disappeared from the archive system without leaving a clear trace. No sign of intrusion. No report of loss. Everything had happened in silence, as if those documents had never existed. Charles gripped the pages tighter. That number was not only shocking, it was a direct blow to the very foundation of transparency that the monarchy had always tried to uphold. Because if those files had truly vanished, then the question was not only who had taken them, but why they needed to disappear. The answer began to emerge as he kept reading. There was no direct order recorded. No clear confession. But the small details assembled into a picture that could not be denied. A network. A group operating in silence, organized, and shielded by the very secrecy of the system they were manipulating. In the notes, the Queen referred to it with a cold name. The Black Hand. Not an official organization. No name recorded in any document. Yet its existence could be felt through repeating traces. Decisions altered at the last moment. Documents replaced. Information withheld or selectively leaked. All serving one single purpose: to control the flow of truth. And at the center of that network, the name Camilla appeared as a point of convergence. Charles felt an invisible pressure tightening around his chest, not because he had never suspected, but because he had never imagined it could go this far. She did not only want to stand beside him as his wife. She wanted to hold the secrets that could shape how the world saw him, saw the monarchy, and even how history would remember them. He recalled moments that had once seemed harmless. Times when Camilla had asked to review certain documents. Conversations brief yet layered with implication. Advice that appeared casual but led to critical decisions. When everything was put together, nothing remained coincidence. It was a strategy built not in a single day, but over many years. Step by step. Detail by detail. Quietly. Without drawing attention, leaving no clear trace. Yet enough to create a system of influence that no one recognized until it was too late. Charles turned to the final letter. The handwriting here was slightly unsteady, as if the writer had grown weaker. But the message was clearer than ever. If you are reading these lines, be cautious of what you see and what you do not see. The greatest danger does not lie with those who oppose you directly, but with those who stand right beside you. A silence stretched on. Those words were not just a warning. They were a final testament. A responsibility passed on. A burden that now only he had to face. Behind him, the space remained silent. But that silence was no longer harmless. It felt like a stage just before a great performance begins. Charles slowly lowered the letters. His gaze had changed. No longer confusion, but clarity. A cold awareness of what was unfolding around him. If what was written in those letters was true, then he was not merely facing a secret. He was facing a war. Not with an external enemy, but with a force that had embedded itself into the very structure of the monarchy. And in that war, the line between ally and traitor had become thinner than ever. But ladies and gentlemen, the betrayal did not end with old sheets of paper lying silently in a chest beneath the cellar. It was not just words of warning from the past. It had stepped into the light. It had turned into action. Because the moment these secrets were at risk of being exposed, a campaign was activated. A campaign without force. Without open conspiracy. Yet sophisticated enough to manipulate the perception of an entire nation. And the target of that campaign was none other than the king. A ruthless plan. A carefully constructed performance. Designed to turn the very head of the monarchy into a man seen as unstable in the eyes of the public. And that was only the beginning of the true nightmare. When Camilla sensed that Charles had begun to suspect, she did not wait. She acted quickly, precisely, and coldly, as if this entire script had been prepared long in advance. In the world of power, the one who moves first does not only gain advantage, but shapes the narrative. And Camilla understood that better than anyone. The first signals appeared almost unnoticed. A few small articles, tucked into the corners of the media, raising seemingly harmless questions about the mental condition of the king. The words were written in a cautious tone, not asserting, yet enough to plant a seed of doubt in the public mind. Was Charles under too much pressure after the passing of his mother? Was he gradually losing control of his emotions? Then those questions began to spread. Within just a few weeks, similar articles appeared with increasing frequency. No longer hidden in obscure corners, they moved to the front pages. Commentary programs began dissecting every action, every gesture of the king. A prolonged glance. A hesitant reply. Everything was cut, analyzed, and interpreted in a negative direction. A picture was being painted. And in that picture, Charles was no longer a composed monarch. He became a man haunted, disoriented, and more dangerously, no longer fit to lead. This was not coincidence. This was a campaign. Camilla had mobilized a sophisticated media network, people who knew how to manipulate information without leaving a trace. There were no direct orders, no clear evidence, yet the consistency of the message was undeniable. Everything pointed toward a single goal: to shake public trust in the king. And the most terrifying part was not blatant lies. It was half-truths. Real details placed within a distorted context. Stories retold in a way that led the audience to reach conclusions on their own without being forced. That was the art of manipulation. But Camilla had underestimated one thing. Charles was not a man who could be cornered without resistance. He might remain silent in public, but in the shadows he began to act. Quietly. Without display. Yet step by step he began to rebuild the truth. The letters in the chest beneath the wine cellar were not just evidence. They were a starting point. Charles understood that to confront such a tightly organized network, he needed more than emotion. He needed undeniable proof. And that was when he turned to leading handwriting experts. People outside the monarchy, uninfluenced by politics. Individuals whose reputations were built on absolute precision. Every stroke, every pressure of the pen, every spacing between letters. All could be analyzed. The documents were sent in complete secrecy. No one beyond a very small group knew of this investigation. Even his closest aides were not informed. And then the results came back. Not in a lengthy report, but in a short, cold conclusion. Every signature on the orders to destroy the files had been forged. A forgery so sophisticated that without the highest level of technology and expertise, no one could have detected it. Yet no matter how refined, it still left traces. Small inconsistencies, unnatural rhythms, details that only true experts could see. Charles read the report many times. Not because he did not understand, but because he needed to be certain that he was not falling into another trap. But the truth was now clear. The missing files were not an accident. They had been deliberately erased. And to do that required power, resources, and most importantly, protection. Camilla. Her name did not appear in any document. Yet every path led back to her. And then, another number emerged. A number that made even Charles pause. Nearly £2 million. That was the amount spent from private funds, routed through multiple layers of intermediaries, to sustain a professional media team. Not ordinary journalists, but individuals who specialized in creating narratives. People who knew how to turn rumors into trends. People who could steer the flow of public opinion like directing a river. A team that, internally, was known by a cold name. Vultures. They did not create truth. They waited. They watched. And when the moment came, they descended, tearing apart the reputation of their target with carefully selected fragments of information. This time, the target was none other than the king. Charles could feel the pressure tightening around him, not only from what he had read, but from what he was beginning to see in real life. Suspicious glances, whispered conversations, questions asked in tones no longer marked by respect. The campaign was in motion, and if he did not act in time, it would achieve its objective before he had the chance to speak the truth. But what troubled Charles most was not his reputation. It was the long-term consequence. If the public came to believe that the king was unstable, then anything he said afterward would be doubted. Even if he presented evidence, it would be dismissed as the product of an unsteady mind. That was the most strategic move of the campaign. There was no need to deny the truth, only to make the one who spoke the truth appear unreliable. Charles stood before a difficult choice: remain silent and let everything pass, or confront it and accept the risk. He chose the second. Not because he wanted to win, but because he understood that if he remained silent, then what had been recorded in those letters would be buried forever. But ladies and gentlemen, in every game, there are always pieces the opponent cannot see. Camilla believed she controlled everything: information, media, public perception. She believed that by staying one step ahead, she would always hold the advantage. But she overlooked one critical factor: a bond that could not be manipulated by money or power: blood. Because elsewhere, beyond the reach of the media campaign, someone was watching every development in a silence that felt almost ominous. Someone who was not only the heir, but the one who understood more clearly than anyone what was happening: Prince William. The only person with enough standing, enough trust, and enough resolve to step forward when the time came. And when William entered the game, nothing would remain the same. The moment Prince William held his grandmother's letter at Ray Mill House, the space seemed to freeze. The dim light from the cellar cast across his face, revealing every tense line. No words. No outburst. Yet his hands tightened until they turned pale, as if restraining a storm of emotion rising within. It was not only anger. It was pain. The feeling of betrayal when the most sacred values of his family had been trampled in silence. William read each line. Slowly, carefully, as if every word carried the weight of history. He knew the person who had written them, the woman who had devoted her life to keeping the monarchy steady through unseen storms. And if she had chosen to leave these words behind, then it was not merely a warning. It was a judgment passed on to the next generation. Charles stood not far away. He did not urge. He did not explain. He simply watched in silence, because he knew that some truths did not need words. They spoke for themselves. And when William folded the letter, his gaze changed. No longer confusion, no longer doubt. Only a cold and decisive resolve remained. In that moment, an alliance was formed. No oath, no ceremony. Only absolute understanding between two generations, father and son, the king and the heir. They were not only protecting the honor of the monarchy, they were protecting the memory of the one who had passed. And that made them more dangerous than ever. The days that followed unfolded in an unsettling silence. There were no public statements, no reaction to the rumors spreading rapidly. But behind closed doors, a plan was drawn with absolute precision, step by step, detail by detail. There was no room for error. Charles and William understood that they could not confront this with emotion. They needed a stage, a place where the truth could not be distorted, a place where every eye would be fixed on the same point. And that place was the Privy Council. This was not just a meeting. It was the true center of power, where the most important decisions of the kingdom were made. Those present were not a public easily swayed by media. They were individuals who understood how power operated. People not easily manipulated by constructed narratives. On that day, the atmosphere was suffocatingly heavy. Camilla entered the meeting room with her familiar demeanor, confident, composed, as if she still controlled everything. But there was one difference. The eyes of those around her were no longer the same. The absolute trust was gone. The unconditional respect had faded. In its place was caution. Unanswered questions. William had arrived early. He stood behind Charles, saying nothing, yet his presence alone was enough to shift the balance. No longer a king standing alone against suspicion, but an alliance. A strength reinforced by trust and blood. The meeting began as usual. Reports. Procedures. Everything followed protocol. But everyone felt it. A storm was waiting to break. And then Charles stood. There was no signal, No introduction. He placed his hand on the table and struck it firmly. The sound echoed through the room like thunder. Enough. 2 short words. Yet enough to stop every conversation. Every eye turned toward him. Charles did not raise his voice. But every word he spoke was clear, sharp, and impossible to ignore. He did not speak of emotion. He did not describe betrayal with dramatic language. He presented facts, evidence, details, the letters, the forensic results, the numbers that could not be denied. The room fell into silence. Camilla stood there. For the first time, the shell of confidence began to crack. Her gaze wavered, not because she did not understand what was happening, but because she realized she no longer controlled the narrative. William stepped forward. He said nothing, but that single movement was enough to define his position. Not only the heir, but the one standing beside the king. And that unity was something Camilla had not foreseen. Charles continued. But this time, he did not use his own words. He opened one of the letters. His voice slowed. And when he read, it was no longer the voice of a king. It was the voice of a mother. A late queen. A woman no one in that room could question or deny. Each line sounded heavy and undeniable. It was not an accusation. It was a final testament. And in that moment, everything changed. No more debate. No more doubt. Because no one could stand and argue against the words of someone who had spent her entire life protecting the crown. Camilla said nothing. No resistance. No denial. Because she understood that any word now would only make everything worse. Her silence was not strategy. It was helplessness. Charles looked directly at her. No longer the gaze of a husband, but of a king carrying out his duty. He did not need to shout. He did not need to threaten. The truth had done that for him. The decision was made not in anger, but in the cold clarity of reason. One by one, the honors, the power, the layers of protection that had once shielded Camilla began to fall away. There was no force, no chaos, only an ending. An ending that had been written long before, in the letters buried beneath the wine cellar. When the meeting ended, no one spoke. No one needed to, because everyone understood that they had just witnessed a moment that would be recorded in history. Outside, the last light of day was fading. The sky turned a pale gray, as if nature itself sensed the shift taking place. And ladies and gentlemen, as the final sunlight disappeared over Buckingham Square, the invisible crown of Camilla shattered completely. Not with sound, not with a blow, but with truth. The truth always arrives slowly. But when it does, nothing can stop it. The scandal at Ray Mill House, on the surface, may appear to be nothing more than a family conflict pushed to its breaking point. But the deeper we go into each layer of truth, the clearer it becomes that this is not simply a story of people living under one roof. This is a real battle. A battle to protect the soul of the House of Windsor, where every decision does not only affect the present, but shapes how history will remember an entire reign. Camilla spent decades building a position that seemed irreplaceable. Step by step, she constructed influence, strengthened power, and expanded her network in silence. This was not a sudden rise. It was a long strategy, carefully calculated, where every detail served a final objective. But in that process, she made a fundamental mistake. She believed that power could be preserved forever if it were hidden deeply enough. She believed that secrets, once buried far enough, would never be discovered. But history has never worked that way. The truth is like an underground current. It can be compressed, concealed, even forgotten for a long time. But it does not disappear. It waits. And when the pressure becomes great enough, when the conditions are right, it erupts with a force that cannot be stopped. And when it rises, it does not only reveal what has been hidden, it washes away everything built on the foundation of illusion. Today, what makes this story different is not only that the truth has been revealed, it is that the king is no longer alone. Beside him stands not only the memory and legacy of his late mother, but also the firm presence of his son, the sole heir ready to step forward when the moment arrives. That bond is not only familial, it is a symbol. A statement that monarchy is not personal power. It is a responsibility passed down through generations. And that responsibility can only endure if it is tied to truth. Charles's promise of an era of integrity, for a long time, may have been seen as a formal declaration. But after everything that has happened, it is no longer empty words. It has been proven through action, through the choice to confront rather than avoid, through the decision to accept a painful but necessary reckoning in order to preserve the core values of the monarchy. History, at this moment, has turned a new page. A page written not only with victories, but with truths restored to their rightful place. Justice for the late Queen did not come through loud declarations. It came in the silence of undeniable evidence, and in the agreement of those who understand what must be protected. And now, the question is no longer reserved for those inside the story. It is for all of us. What do you think about William's decisive action this time? Is it a necessary step to protect the monarchy, or the beginning of a new and turbulent era? Leave your comment below to share your perspective. Do not forget to like and subscribe to follow us in the next stories, where untold secrets will gradually be revealed. And now, goodbye and see you again. In the final days of June, the health of King Charles continuously showed worrying signs. The public frequently saw a tired, emaciated monarch who was forced to cancel a series of important royal schedules. The media constantly speculated about his physical condition, but the truth behind the closed doors of the palace was much darker. What was truly draining the strength of the king was not just his health, but the suffocating weight of a secret he had just accidentally discovered. On a quiet night in the forbidden archive room, deep inside Windsor Castle, King Charles found a dusty envelope, carefully sealed with red wax. Printed on, it was the personal coat of arms of the late Queen Elizabeth II. This was a top-secret letter, completely hidden from the royal family since the day the great monarch took her last breath. As the red wax crumbled, the handwritten words of the Queen appeared, bringing a shocking blow that could collapse the entire order of Buckingham Palace. The Queen had left behind a great moral legacy, the true soul and power of the British crown. But the heir to this massive legacy was not King Charles, not Prince William, and certainly not the future king, Prince George. The person personally chosen by the Queen was little Princess Charlotte. Facing this shocking decision of the late Queen, do you think giving such a massive legacy to a little girl is a proud privilege or a cruel burden that robs her of her childhood? Please comment 1 if you think it is an honor, or 2 if you think it is an overwhelming burden. Do not forget to subscribe to the channel, because the secret behind this letter is much darker and more complex than you think. But before we judge the decision of the late Queen, let us turn back the clock, step through the forbidden corridors of Windsor Castle to witness the moment King Charles faced this strange will, where the storm truly began. Deep inside Windsor Castle, the Royal Archive Room is not only a place to store dusty historical documents, but also a fortress hiding the most shocking secrets of the monarchy. And right in this suffocating, cold place, a crack in history was revealed. To understand the shock of this moment, you must realize a terrifying truth. Britain possesses one of the most sophisticated internal security and intelligence networks in the world. Not a single piece of paper, Not a single whisper in the palace can slip past the surveillance system. Yet, somehow, the late Queen Elizabeth II bypassed that entire massive royal intelligence system. Inside an antique oak cabinet, hidden behind a secret compartment designed with a completely independent mechanical locking system without any electronic connection, an envelope had lain dormant for over 400 days. For more than a year since the day the whole of Britain drowned in tears, sending off the great monarch, this document waited patiently, like a time bomb set to detonate at the exact moment the new king was at his weakest. And when King Charles opened that lock, what he found was exactly 3 handwritten pages. Only 3 pages, but their weight was enough to crush any solid gold crown. As the eyes of King Charles swept over the first lines, his hands, bearing the marks of age and illness, began to tremble. It was not the trembling of a frail old man, but the instinctive fear of a child facing the absolute authority of his late mother. The handwriting was slanted, decisive, and sharp, unmistakable. It was the handwriting of Queen Elizabeth II. Even the signature at the bottom of the page, Elizabeth R., still radiated an invisible pressure, an affirmation that even though she was laid to rest in the royal vault, she was still the one controlling this chess game of power. Right at the moment the tension in the room reached its peak, the creaking sound of the old oak door echoed. Queen Camilla stepped in. She probably just intended to find her husband, bringing a daily concern after days of seeing him collapsing from illness. But the reaction of King Charles right then exposed the severity of the 3 pages. Contrary to his usual calmness, the king almost immediately turned the letter pages face down on the table, his sharp and defensive gaze darting toward the wife he loved the most. In a stern, uncompromising tone, he demanded that she leave and absolutely not step inside. The fact that Queen Camilla, the person with the second highest authority in the palace today, was brutally forbidden from accessing this document affirmed one thing: this was not a matter of the dynasty, this was a matter of bloodline. This was a secret too big, too dangerous, and so personal that those without the direct bloodline of the Windsor family were absolutely not allowed to know. When the door closed, King Charles once again faced the bitter truth on the page. It is time we clarify one thing, to avoid misunderstandings that could tear the royal family apart. Queen Elizabeth II, a person who spent 70 years of her life protecting the principles, absolutely did not interfere with the Constitution. The Act of Settlement is inviolable. Prince George is still second in line, and the boy will certainly become King of the United Kingdom. He will wear the St. Edward crown, will sit on the throne, and will be the face of the entire Commonwealth. That is the visible crown. However, what the Queen left in these 3 pages is more sophisticated and profound than any legal text. She gave little Princess Charlotte an invisible crown. The Queen, with her sharp political vision honed through 7 decades of reign, saw through the future. She realized that a king on the throne is just the tip of the iceberg. For the monarchy to survive the media storms, family scandals, and the ruthless judgment of the new era, the British royal family needs a firekeeper. An heir of immense courage, iron discipline, and an unbending mental strength. And that person is not older brother George or youngest brother Louis. The Queen saw her own reflection, a brave and steadfast Elizabeth, inside her great-granddaughter Charlotte. The Queen entrusted Charlotte with the responsibility of becoming the gatekeeper of the royal family. This means that, in the future, when George has to bear massive political pressures, Charlotte will be the one standing behind, making the most difficult, most ruthless decisions and doing the dirty work to protect the throne for her brother. It is like the role of Princess Anne to King Charles now, but demanded by the Queen at a level 100 times more extreme and rigorous. She demanded that Charlotte must put duty above personal happiness, must sacrifice the self to maintain the us, to maintain the survival of the crown. A little girl who has just passed the age of 9 is now bound to a life sentence of duty and sacrifice, judged by her own powerful great-grandmother. King Charles understood that this will was not a privilege, but a sentence permanently depriving his little granddaughter of her freedom. An emergency call from Windsor Castle was encrypted with the highest priority, breaking the rare, peaceful atmosphere at Adelaide Cottage in the middle of the night. Prince William was summoned immediately. There was no specific explanation given over the phone line, only the unusually tense, deep voice of King Charles. As the jet-black armored Range Rover rushed through the giant iron gates of Windsor and sank into the thick night, a bad premonition began to squeeze the chest of the future king. More than anyone, William understood perfectly well that, in the cold world of royal power, sudden summons in the middle of the night never brought good news. Stepping into the forbidden archive room that was terrifyingly quiet, William saw his father. Before his eyes was not an authoritative monarch running the country, but seemingly just an old man bowing his head tiredly over 3 yellowed pages. King Charles did not say an unnecessary word, he just silently pushed the letter, bearing the sharp slanted handwriting of the late Queen Elizabeth II toward his son. The atmosphere was so quiet that one could clearly hear every heavy breath. In the first moments, as the eyes of William swept over the first lines praising the resilient qualities, iron discipline, and innate leadership traits of Charlotte, a flash of pride crossed the heart of the father. Clearly, the great queen, with her perceptive eyes, had seen the brilliant aura hidden deep inside his little daughter. But that feeling of honor only existed for a fleeting moment, before it crashed into a cruel truth. When reading the lines where the Queen officially handed over the invisible crown, demanding that Charlotte must become the ultimate gatekeeper, must sacrifice her entire personal self to shoulder the mission of protecting the throne at all costs for her brother, the face of William turned pale. The feeling of pride completely evaporated, replaced by a profound fear, as cold as blades ready to slash his mind. An uncontrollable trembling began to spread from the hands, gripping the edge of the letter, to the utterly shocked eyes of William. He looked up at his father, his breathing becoming rapid. To billions of audiences out there, the royal family is a modern fairy tale with sparkling diamond-studded crowns and grand parade ceremonies. But to William, it is a giant machine, ready to mercilessly crush people. There is a cruel truth, a death number buried deep under the layers of top-secret internal reports at the palace that the public has never been allowed to know. Internal psychological evaluation data once pointed out a chilling reality. Up to 78% of female royal members have faced extremely severe psychological crises, falling into the deep pit of depression, anxiety disorders, or panic due to massive media pressure and the suffocating grip of royal rules. 78%. That is not a lifeless statistic on paper, that is a bleeding life sentence. And William, more than any other man in this world, understands too well the price to pay for that 78%. It was paid with the very blood, tears, and tragedies in his family. He witnessed with his own eyes his late mother, Princess Diana, being suppressed by the royal machinery and ruthlessly hunted by media lenses until her last breaths in that dark Paris tunnel. He saw the continuous collapse of the women who stepped into the Windsor family, from the bitterness of Sarah Ferguson, the psychological fractures leading to the escape of Meghan Markle, to even his resilient wife, Princess Kate, who is currently struggling to fight illness while still forcing herself to smile in front of the public. The crown is not only made of gold and precious stones, it is forged by the exhausting draining of the souls of the women who wear it. Yet now, they want to put the heaviest, most cruel and loneliest yoke on the shoulders of his little daughter, who is only 9 years old. Rage exploded. It tore through the usual calmness and royal decorum of the future king. No longer a proper dialogue between the Prince of Wales and the King of the United Kingdom, it was the roar of a father who is desperate, indignant, and ready to fight the whole world to protect his child. William stepped forward, resting both hands on the table, his eyes burning with red bloodshot streaks, piercing straight at King Charles. He questioned his father with unprecedented harshness. Is this truly a sacred honor from the great-grandmother, or is Charlotte just being forced to become a new generation scapegoat for the image of Buckingham Palace? In the context of the reputation of the monarchy becoming increasingly shaky in the face of endless scandals and the turning away of the younger generation, the palace craves a perfect figure to cling to. The Queen, with her political vision ahead of her time, chose Charlotte. The smart, determined little girl who always knows how to control herself perfectly in front of all lenses, a flawless diplomatic ambassador. But William firmly, absolutely refused to use his daughter as a media shield. That is a child, father. She is not a tool to heal the cracks of thousands of years of history, nor a gatekeeper to clean up the dirty, shattered pieces of the royal family. The words of William pierced through the suffocating atmosphere of the room like spears. He could not accept that people planned to strip away the innocence, the right to make mistakes, and the right to live a normal life of a child from the hands of Charlotte. He had lost his mother to the cruelty of the media. He swore at all costs not to let his daughter become the next victim sacrificed on the altar of royal greatness. The atmosphere in the archive room became so tense it was freezing. The two most powerful men in the United Kingdom stood facing each other, fiercely torn between primal family love and absolute submission to the will of the late Queen. Every effort to explain or soothe by King Charles hit an impenetrable wall of indignation from the father standing to protect his child. The silence blanketing the forbidden archive room at Windsor Castle right now was so heavy that one could clearly hear the blood vessels throbbing at the temples of Prince William. His rage was still there, blazing like a fire waiting to burn down all rules of decorum. But King Charles, with his old hands and eyes heavy with sympathy, did not argue back. He just quietly turned to the second page of the letter. The sound of yellowed paper rubbing together echoed dryly. And it was right on this page that a secret buried for many years forced the future king to swallow his sharp words, making way for a silent shock. The great Queen Elizabeth II never made decisions based on emotion. She was the embodiment of meticulous calculation, strategic vision, and a perfectly cold rationality. However, what the whole of Britain, the entire massive royal intelligence system, and even her most trusted courtiers did not know was that during the last 5 years of her life, the monarch had secretly carried out a top-secret project. The letter revealed a chilling number. The Queen had personally recorded exactly 102 subtle moments of Princess Charlotte. 102 times. That was a secret psychological dossier built not by experts, but by a royal who had spent 7 decades observing people, while the whole world was busy dissecting the adorable outfits of Charlotte, or laughing at the times the little girl waved to the public. Behind the walls of Buckingham Palace, the perceptive eyes of the Queen were quietly evaluating every blink, every breath, every unconditional reflex of her little great-granddaughter. And the landmark event, the moment that decided the fate of Charlotte, was described in detail by the Queen in the letter through a deep memory at St. George Chapel. Let us turn back time, returning to one of the most solemn ceremonies of the dynasty at St. George Chapel. Under the ancient limestone arches that had witnessed centuries of ups and downs of kings, the atmosphere was suffocatingly sacred. Everything was happening perfectly like a play staged by a flawless royal machine. The movement formations of the royal members were calculated precisely to every centimeter. In that world, perfection is not an option, it is a command. All personal emotions must be erased to make way for the majesty of the crown. And then the incident happened. A young page boy, wearing a heavy ceremonial uniform, slipped his hand. The brilliant, gold-fringed red velvet cushion, a symbolic prop of the ceremony, fell with a thud onto the cold stone floor. That sound echoed not too loudly, but in the quiet space of St. George, it was as sharp as a gunshot. The boy froze, his eyes widening in absolute panic. His breath caught, his face turning pale, realizing he had just ruined a solemn ritual under the eyes of the entire dynasty. Following strict royal ceremonial rules, everyone had to pretend nothing had happened. Eyes looking straight, chins raised, steps not allowed to miss a beat. Never complain, never explain, and in this case, it was not allowed to look down. The adult royal members walked past. Even Prince George, the boy born to be king, who had been methodically trained in royal demeanor, kept the formation, his eyes looking straight ahead flawlessly. But Charlotte did not. In a detailingly poignant flashback, the Queen described the moment that 5-year-old girl made a decision outside all frameworks. Despite the unwritten rules clamping around, Charlotte slightly stopped. She broke the perfect ceremonial formation. One tiny foot stepped out of the line. Charlotte bent down, without any hesitation, picking up the velvet cushion. She thrust it into the hands of the trembling page boy, smiled slightly, and threw him a warm, quiet look, but containing a strange, reassuring power. Lightning fast, natural, and completely instinctive. After that, Charlotte returned to the formation, continuing to walk as if that missed beat had never existed. It only took 3 seconds. Those short 3 seconds were swallowed up in a ceremony lasting for hours, but it completely defeated the rational defense system of Queen Elizabeth. Sitting at the highest position, taking in the whole event, the Queen realized a sharp truth. She wrote in the letter with trembling handwriting of emotion, "The royal machine can forge perfection. We can teach a child how to walk like a king, how to wave like a queen, how to hide tears behind a diplomatic smile. But no training course, no principle can teach compassion in moments of crisis. Perfection protects the face of the crown, but it is compassion that saves its soul." The Queen saw in Charlotte what the monarchy is desperately craving to survive in the 21st century: genuine empathy. While the whole system is programmed to maintain a cold shell, Charlotte chose humanity over rules. The Queen understood that, when Prince George takes the throne, he will have to face a world full of ruthless judgment. The crown will weigh heavily on George, forcing him to become a rigid symbol. At that time, the throne will be very cold and lonely. Without someone with a warm heart, brave enough to break the rules when necessary, and with enough love to pull him back to humanity, George will collapse. The monarchy will fall from within. The Queen did not choose Charlotte because she wanted to turn the little girl into a scapegoat. She chose Charlotte because she knew only such an innate heart has enough strength to contain both the pain of others and the weight of a dynasty. 102 recorded moments were 102 times the Queen carefully verified the ego of the little girl before making the most heartbreaking decision of her reigning life, handing the sword to protect the royal family into the hands of a little girl. Reading to the last lines of the second page, a terrifying silence enveloped William. His rapid breathing of anger had vanished, replaced by a quiet sorrow. Suppressed tears began to blur the vision of the father. He suddenly realized that this letter was not a sentence. This was the final plea of a wise monarch, a woman who had dedicated her whole life to Britain, pleading with him to let his daughter become the savior for the legacy of the family. The suffocating silence between King Charles and Prince William was suddenly torn apart by decisive footsteps, echoing loudly on the ancient stone floor of the corridor. There was no cautious knock on the door or announcement from courtiers. The heavy oak door swung open. Standing at the threshold was a woman with a cold demeanor, sharp eyes, and a proud posture never bent by time, Princess Royal Anne, the younger sister of King Charles, and also the only child to fully inherit the iron will of the late Queen Elizabeth II. The appearance of Princess Anne at this forbidden archive room in the middle of the night was not a coincidence. She did not come to comfort her brother or dissuade her nephew. Anne walked straight toward the wooden table, where the handwritten pages of the Queen lay silently. From the pocket of her dark coat, she slowly pulled out a seemingly harmless object that carried the weight of a ticking time bomb,